Hey y'all, I'm going to try to keep this really brief. I just want to do a quick check-in with you. I know as we go into the weekend, some of you are going to be using your weekends to try to catch up and get as much as you can done. Some of you are even going to try to work ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of an idea of what's coming up next week. I will do another video before you have your first lab practical, that will open on Thursday. And then it will extend through the Friday, and then Friday will be your due date at 11:59 p.m. So I'm going to briefly go over that and kind of what's expected and where you should be at. So hopefully, again, you're kind of getting in a groove. I know, unfortunately, with this 8-week class, it doesn't give you a whole lot of time to kind of ease into it. You're just kind of thrown into it. And so you guys are doing great. I love all the questions that are coming through on the muddiest points. Keep those coming, and I will try to answer those as quickly as I can. And if you haven't been doing the muddiest point, please make sure that you go ahead and do that for this week. That muddiest point you'll be expected to do one each week. It's a discussion board assignment. And you should read, some of the other students' muddiest points, because I've kind of answered some of them back and given hints, and it might help you out. So again, you can always go to this syllabus. I'm just going to go ahead and quick change this over to year view here. So you can always go to this syllabus and kind of see where, if you scroll down below the go home, it will give you an idea of what is due that week. So you can see again, Wednesday, we have a lot of things due on Wednesday, January 17th. January 18th on Thursday. Hopefully you took that Respondus extra credit quiz. If you haven't taken that, go ahead and download Respondus and make sure you take that by this weekend. So that way then you've worked out all the kinks with Respondus, and hopefully we won't have any issues by the time you get to your first practical, so you can kind of just breathe easy. I mean, it's stressful enough, right, without having any technological issues. So I really want to get those tech issues out of the way before we actually get to the exams and practicals. Again, so there's that muddiest point. Make sure that you're doing those muddiest points each week. And again, it's a great way for me to see what questions you have, for me to be able to interact with you, and for the students to see, all of you to see each other's questions and interact with each other. So I know you saw that we bumped right into chemistry Wednesday, because I keep forgetting that Monday off. So on Wednesday, we jumped right into that chemistry, and I know it was a lot, especially if you haven't had chemistry in a while. So that's one thing I maybe suggest you spend some time on over the weekend. Then we're diving into cell structure and function towards the end of this week. And then at the beginning of next week, if you can, try to go ahead and move ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the home page and then go into the lecture here. Jump ahead as much as you can in terms of trying to prepare for that exam, because it's next week already, next weekend, I should say. So again, we're going to be diving into cell structure and function. Hopefully this is mostly a review for most of you. And if you haven't figured out, I love to use the office memes. So whenever I can, I squeeze them in there. But like I said, hopefully this is a review. If it's not, again, try to really get started and maybe even finish that over the weekend if you can. This, I know, is like a heftier lecture series, but that cell is really important for you to understand. And it's not just for 201, but it will carry through for 202. So understanding especially the plasma membrane of the cell is going to be vital to your understanding of how the kidney functions at the level of a nephron, what's called the functional unit of the kidney. So I know that's way off in the distance, but what I'm really trying to get at is that some of this stuff is really important, because it's not just for this semester. It will also carry over for 202 and help you be successful in 202. So as you're going through this lecture, really pay attention to the plasma membrane, what happens at the plasma membrane, how things move across the plasma membrane and are transported across the plasma membrane. That is really important in terms of passive transport and active transport. So again, if you have questions on that, that is, I'm so happy to set up a time and go over that for you, because I do want to make sure that you understand that for 202 as well as the rest of 201. And then again, remember that we have those lecture quizzes. I believe everyone's taking them, so good on you guys. I feel like this is a really good group, so please use each other. It's been a while since I've had a group that has been really this dedicated for my 8-week sessions. So I really hope that you guys can rely on each other and use each other, as well as, again, I'm happy to help you. So that's kind of what's going on with lecture. The very last lecture for this series will be on tissues. Now, thankfully, we are going over this in lab, and this should really help you out with the lecture, because you're going to see the lecture in the lab for tissues really go well together. So hopefully by the time you get to this lecture, you've already had so much of it in lab that it will make this lecture pretty easy. Or vice versa, if you're really struggling with the tissue lab, come watch this lecture, okay? Watch the tissue lectures, and that should really help you out with the lab. Okay, so that's where we're at. I will talk a little bit more about the exam as we get closer to it. But if you would like, I know some students have asked what they should be focusing on. So please print out those lecture objectives for the exam and the vocab list, so that way then you can use that as you're going through the lectures, okay? And then that lecture exam will be accessible again over the weekend of the 27th through the 29th, okay? All right, so let me go ahead and dive into what you should be doing for the lab, because as you know, that lab practical is coming up before the exam, so I'm sure you're very interested in how to prepare for that lab practical. So again, I think the toughest, this unfortunately is one of the tougher, I think, lab practicals for most students, and that's because of the histology. So anytime you're working at the cellular level, I know this is challenging. But histology is really interesting, and it can also really help you in 202, because there's more histology associated with 202. So make sure that as you are going through these 4 different, again, general tissue types, that you're asking yourself these 4 questions. So for all of those 4 tissue types, these are the 4 questions that you can get on the practical. And these are the only types of questions that you're going to get with the tissues. One is, what is the general tissue type? So is it epithelial tissue? Is it connective tissue? Is it muscle tissue? Is it nervous tissue? Okay. The second question we can ask is, what is the specific tissue type? Meaning, okay, if it's an epithelial tissue, is it simple squamous epithelial tissue? Is it simple cuboidal? Is it simple columnar? Okay, so that's the specific tissue type. Then we might just show a picture of the tissue and say, give an example of one location. It says learn 1 or 2, but really if you learn 1 location, then that's what's most important. You need 1 location, okay, for where you might find that tissue in the body. And if you are watching my videos, I usually give you a hint as to which tissues it's most important for you to remember that tissue type in, because again, I know what you're going to go into for 202 because I teach 202. So I try to kind of focus in on which locations we're going to focus in on for 202 for those tissue types, okay? So again, make sure to watch my videos. I told you to watch this week 2 announcement from last semester. Even though it was from last semester and I have the first 10 minutes of it are not for you, just fast forward to minute 10, and that's where I start to go over the actual epithelial lab, okay? So you can go through that, and I'll focus in on that. The soft chalk activities and the flashcards are for that repetition. Honestly, unless you're super into histology, I would skip these extras on the shotgun histology. It's just, like I said, it's more for the 16-week classes, or, you know, at the end of the semester, if you want to go back and like look at shotgun histology. But like I said, we're so strapped for time that I really want you to just focus on the repetition. Okay. So I know that you did epithelial tissue this week. Hopefully you got into connective tissue. Connective tissue is usually tough. So don't be alarmed if you struggled with that. That's usually one of the tougher tissues. Again, please, please, please watch my video on this. I have a video where I actually go over connective tissue and tell you how to ID those tissues. Especially when you're talking about things like dense regular connective tissue versus dense irregular connective tissue. I give you hints on how to ID those from each other. So make sure you watch that video, okay? Again, use the soft chalk activities and those flashcards to really help in terms of repetition. Okay, I'm trying to keep this moving. Sorry, guys. As you get into muscle and nervous tissue, you'll see there's not as much in terms of muscle tissue and nervous tissue. You only have skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle to identify, and they're pretty easy to identify. They have very specific characteristics. So like skeletal muscles, pretty easy because you'll see again the nuclei are kind of on the periphery, and they're multinucleate. So again, there's going to be lots of, and I give you all those hints in my video. So make sure that you watch my video for that. And then again, just follow that same rule of going through the PowerPoint slides, introducing yourself to what's expected for you to know on those slides, and then practice, practice, practice. Okay. Lastly, the last lab that you will have to do for this lab practical will be the skin. Okay. So if you go through this is the skin lab. And I know that you're going to get this before the lecture, which makes it more challenging. So do your best. Again, I have a PowerPoint, and I think I have Dr. Morley's lab video, but I think probably over this weekend I'll go ahead and make my own video of the histology of the skin, just to help you out a little bit and really kind of narrow down what you need to focus in on. So, and there, like I said, take those, download those PowerPoint slides just like you always do, and go over these major features in skin. So that's kind of again, hopefully you're getting that routine down. And then, of course, make sure that you're going to go through and go through those soft chalk exercises, and then of course use those StudyMate flashcards that we always have at the bottom. Again, I would skip that shotgun histology for now, because that shotgun histology is just a little too much information for you to know. So that's kind of where we're at. So then if you go back here, please remember that I do have a practical review session. I've tried to run review sessions in the past, and I usually only get one student because it's just so hard for me to find a time that I can get all of you together. So what I did is I went ahead and recorded that review session. So if you'd like, you can go ahead and watch that if you're just, hanging out this weekend and you kind of want to see what you're in for, even if you haven't watched some of the other labs yet. It might be a good idea just to kind of check that out and see what kinds of things you should focus in on. And then you can take that online practice practical. I believe, let me see, I have this opening January 19th for you. Again, I try not to open them too early because I don't want you to not study for the lab. Again, this practice practical is just to give you an idea of where you're at and kind of practice taking a practical, but it doesn't cover everything that you need to know for the practical. So that's why I always give you that kind of caveat. Be careful with that. And then that first lab practical will be accessible January 25th. All right. I know that this is coming at you fast and furious. And that's just how this 8-week course is. But on the plus side, the information that you're being tested on is never older than 2 weeks. So there's one advantage for you. So please, please, please Email me questions. I will be constantly checking my Canvas this weekend to make sure that I get your questions answered, and I will do what I can. If you have questions to supply some additional resources, I tried to add in some activities for you. So I will probably add in a few more if you have questions this weekend. I do have this, I just bought this. It is the Kaplan coloring book for anatomy and physiology, and it's actually pretty decent. So I am going to try to post a few things here and there. I can't obviously post too much, but post things here and there for you that I feel would be really beneficial. All right, that's it. If you guys have any questions, please let me know, and I will be available this weekend. Take care.